So first of all, what is Apex code best practices? So mm, Apex code is used to write a custom and robust logic as in any of the language. Uh, there are key coding principle and best practices that will be written that will help you to write efficient and scalable coding. So, Apex coding best practice following a best practices is good for it will help for writing a efficient and a scalable code uh, in any of the programming language. So, in Apex, we will see what is the use of coding best practices. So the main purpose of using a best practices in Apex is, so we know like Apex is means a Salesforce is a multi-tenant architecture. So where means the resources are shared, and there will not be if multiple instances are there, multiple projects are working in a same cloud. So there will be a shared resource used up while running any of the transactions. So there will be, so if we use best practices, so it will enforce a Salesforce governor limit, which will not create a monopoly for a single resource who is using shared resources in Salesforce. So, this is the main point where why we use Apex coding as a best practices. Other points, other use of best practices are simplicity, readability, design, and efficient. So,
Anisha?
right. So, simplicity is something like we should write our code in very simple and very optimized way. So, to write a small logic, we don't have to give a lots of variable declaration or kind of lots of description on the code while writing. So we should be in an optimized. We should be writing the code in an optimized way. Readable is play an important role. Let's suppose if we are deploying in any of the existing project, and uh, if the code is not very readable or kind of not very catchy, so it will be a problem for any other developer to understand what is the thought process of previous developer and why he wrote that code. Design is a design and efficiency is something like whenever we are going to write any piece of code, we should plan take time to do a planning of any piece of code so that it will be beautifully arranged or in the optimized way, and it should be faster, the execution of the program should be faster. Next is there are some examples of Apex coding best practices. So you can see bulkifying our code, avoiding SQL and DML operations in for loop, pairing of larger data set, using use of map of S object, limit methods. Using of limit methods is most important to get rid of errors and the limit errors. Avoid hard coding. We generally do a very bad practice when we access some kind of record type ID or some other hard coded values if we keep in the Apex code. Using of database method. So database method like in database.insert, update, delete, all kind of method we can use to do DML operations. Exception handling in the Apex, very important. Whenever we are writing any Apex class, we should be knowing which piece of code is a risk code. So based on the risk code, we can define our exception handling. In the in the exception, in the case of exception, what handling code should be written so that it will be execute or it will skip the risk code and execute further codes. So this will also be very important while writing Apex code. One trigger per object. So multiple triggers if we are writing in any of the object, it will be a kind of in the execution will be asynchronous, and means we don't able to control actually which trigger is getting fired. So we don't know how means trigger. So there are, if we are writing three triggers, so which trigger will fire we don't know. So we have to keep a best practice like when the object will be for any object we should have one trigger using of effects, asynchronous effects. Asynchronous effects is something Salesforce will provide some extra limits to asynchronous effects. So we should some of the code means some of the code which is taking a lot of time or not very prior, like sending off uh, not have very priority to execute at that time at the synchronous way, like sending a mail or so those sending a mail or kind of execution in batch. So those kind of things is we can keep in asynchronous way. So next is security and sharing effects in Apex code. So how we can enforce the security and sharing in any of the Apex coding style, like we have a FLS security and object level security. So by default, Apex will run in a system mode. So every permissions should be there. So if we want to restrict some of the permissions, so we will just have FLS or object level security to enforce any of the security things in Apex code. Make reusability of code. It's very important whenever we are doing reuse, means whenever we are writing a method. So let's suppose if we have some method which will whenever we are passing any object name and the filters, so that method should give the query according to the object and the filter getting passed. So we have to make our code little bit generic so that other so it will be used everywhere, so that it will not have too much maintenance on that. So we can do a reusability of a code. Code coverage is something like uh, for a developer, the to do a unit testing, we require code coverage. As in normal practice, we should follow some of the best practice to use to write a test class and to give time on the test class writing. So that is used for unit testing. We will see in further slide like what is the bad practice and good practice on the code coverage side. Return early pattern. Return early pattern is something like let's suppose if we are writing some methods which is returning something, and we all usually write something like at the last we will do a return. So let's suppose there are three conditional statement if conditions. So in the first, if it is following, then we should return at the early stage rather than going at the last of the method to return, because it will increase the comparison time. Avoiding the nested for loop within the for loops. Whenever we are writing any of the nested for loops, it will reduce the efficiency of the efficiency and the performance of a code. We don't have to mix all the automation rules and Apex in for a single requirement. So we should be planned what we are going to use and when we are going to use, because at the end of the day, like it will be very hard to debug individual things, because for these automation tools individually maybe we can able to do individual debug, uh, uh, individual debugging. So naming conventions, which is it is very important portion of FX coding. So whenever some new person will be onboarding in any of the project, and if he have a knowledge, like constant will be written in some capitalized case, and variable should be in camel case. So those all things should be, if he learned, and whenever he's onboarding to some project, if there is and no, like there is no follow up on the naming convention, so it will be very it will be a problem for the person to understand the code or to read the code. So readability will be a problem. Next is set up code review checklist and code review process. So we have to always follow the code review process whenever we are done with any piece of development or any enhancement we are doing in any project. Okay, so for these examples, I just kept a lot of means I kept a smaller description to understand like what is the usage of all these examples. So first is bulkifying FX code. So bulkifying FX code is something like whenever we are writing any of the code, we have to just remove the hard coding style of writing. Instead of hard coding of any index or any kind of hard coding, then in that we have to just loop over on a collection rather than going with the hard coding of this. So as you can see, like there is bad code or good code. There is bad code or good code. So in the bad code is let's suppose a trigger value is coming with a collection of account. So here you can see like index is 0. So we are accessing the data with index as 0. But as a good practice, what we can do, we can just loop over in the collection, and we can just do our comparison stuff. So this is something like it is a mentality of a developer who is thinking like only one record is going to come, and he will be in the safer side. But this will be a bulkified code which tells the mentality of a developer like it may be a chance in the future like
check करता हूँ।
it may be a chance in the future, like if there is any enhancement in the account in any requirement, so we can just go with the collection of this object. Next is avoiding SQL and DML inside the loops. So so we don't have to as a best practice, we don't have to add a SQL or DML operation in the loops. Why? Because these SOQLs, querying of SOQL and DML operation always have some limit provided by Salesforce. So Salesforce provide, let's suppose Salesforce provide 100 SOQL query. So in that case, whenever we are using a for loop, it may be a chance at it is very easy like to reach to these governor limits. So we should avoid declaring the SQL or DML operations inside the for loop. So bad practice is something like so making so iterating over a loop make it easy to reach to these SFTC limits. And what is means the good approach of writing a code is moving the SQL and DML operations outside of the loop. And we should so whenever we are querying any type of S object, so we should query outside the loop. rather than querying in the loop. And updation also we should do after doing all the after collecting all the data in the collection in the for loop. We should update or insert or any DML operation we will do outside of the loop. So so there is a comparison like how the bad code and the good code will be. So bad code is something like here the declaration of a account, and under that account we are querying the contact in within the for loop. So this will be a bad practice. Instead of that, what we can do is we can just query the account with a subquery as a contact, and we can just use the map values, and under that map value we will just access the contacts one by one. So this can be a good practice to use, and it will uh, make the code efficient, and it will increase the performance of a code. Next is querying of larger data set. So as we know, like whenever we are doing a query, SQL query, so a single SQL query will return 50,000 of record. So to process this 50,000 record for any like iteration like a for loop, so it will exceed sometime it will exceed the heap limits. So instead of doing in the like doing the process in the for loop, we will use query for query SQL query for loop. So something like this. So here the data will become as a batch and execute as a batch kind of. So it will increase, it will also increase. So internally what it will do, it will call query or query more to do the processing in a multiple batches. So this this will also increase the performance of a code. Next is, there are some best practices to use SOQL. So whenever we are querying any SOQL, we have a good idea like what filters we can use, so that our query will be our main query or data set and data type will be very less, so that we can just do a operation on that. So we should be like smart enough to extract the query, extract the record which are used for the further business logics. So what we can use, like we can use selective queries using a query optimizer, code index containing null rows, avoiding SQL injection, avoiding query on for loop formula fields. So these stuffs we can do to um, do SQL query. Next is using of map of this object. So map as a collection is very important while doing a coding. So so here we should use a map whenever we are doing any of the object query as a good practice, so that it will give efficient query data and store the data in the memory, and it will streamline the query with substantially help writing efficient Apex code and avoid the governor limits. So we should include the map in our coding style. And next is using of limits. So there are different limits Apex the Salesforce will provide. Some examples are like total SQL allowed in the Apex, some heap size, total heap size, then total number of DML operations. So these all come under cumulative usage. So whenever uh, we will write any of the queries. So we will just give just give a statement something like a total number of queries allowed by the Salesforce and what is the query up till now, and we will just take a difference, and if there is any like any number of queries left, then we can just execute our SQL query. Like here, we can execute our SQL after that comparison. So normally means we should normally use limits to get rid of errors or exception in the transaction. So there are some governor limits that some errors that we will get in our coding style, like too many SQL queries, DML rows, and too many query rows. So we can use query limit methods to avoid these errors. Next is avoiding hard-coded IDs. So let's suppose if we are writing any test class, so what we will do, we will just give some record type ID. Let's suppose we are creating any data factory method, data factory for any class. So we will usually add a record type as a hard-coded value. So what we should do instead of hard coding, we should just give a schema dot a subject type for which a subject type, and what is the name of the record type, and it will just return the record type. So if we will not follow these type of this hard coding practice, the good hard coding practices, so what will happen, like if we are moving our code from a lower sandbox to a higher sandbox, then there will be always difference in the record type, and our code will break at that time whenever we will start doing a test class run. So not only record type is used for hard coding, other hard coding values also. So hard-coded values we should avoid to follow the best practice. Next is using of database method while doing a DML operation. So database method like database.insert, database.update, database.upsert. So these all method we should use rather than using insert collection. So this will allow us to give a partial kind of insert. Let's suppose if we are going to insert 5 records. Out of 5 records, 4 records have all the parameters to insert the data, but one record don't have that. So what will happen, like if we use database.methods, so so the first 4 records will be inserted, and the last one will come as an error, but it will not interrupt the error. It will not break the transaction. So it is very important to have a database method in our coding practices. So we can see the example. So database.insert, and there is a collection with false. So if a success will be there, then it will just give a save result as a success, and we can just do our logic. If error is there, so we can just give the handling code if we want to add up. This is exception handling in Apex. Exception handlings are play a very important role, because whenever we will execute any piece of code, that will be counted as a transaction, and if there will be any error or exception, so the transaction will break and it will not execute further. So if we will use a try catch block, so so we know that wherever we are using a try catch block, that portion of code will be a risk code, and there may be a chances that it can break. So we can just use try catch block to handle our exception. And if in case of exception something comes, then what things we have to do, like we can do error logging, we can update some fields on the error, and we can just store some error messages, or many other things also we can just do in the exception. Next is write one trigger per object per event. So multiple triggers on a single object will be like there is no order present on. So to maintain the order, to write our code like as a best practice, we should follow one trigger per object, and in the same trigger we can use handlers to operate our business logic. Next is use of asynchronous effects. So asynchronous effects as so whatever the trigger will execute, it will be come as a synchronous process. And if we want some result to be delayed, or if there will be some delayed in processing of of any logic, so we can just include a asynchronous module in that, asynchronous way of execution in that, like using a batch, using schedulable scheduled effects, feature method, and queuable. So that it will increase the performance, because whenever the CPU will get time, and then it will execute the future the transaction. And if and also in the asynchronous, we will have an increased limits. So we can use asynchronous as a best practices, so that it will increase the governor limit, and we can just perform on that governor limits. Next is security and sharing of Apex code. So in Apex code, like in default, it will run any Apex class, it will run on system mode. So to enforce some of the security things, we will use object and field level security in the Apex, or some sharing clause. So let's suppose for any object we had created a sharing rule. So either we have to take a sharing rule with or without. So it will just uh, give a share with sharing and without sharing facilities, or inherited sharing in the Apex code. So we can use the security plus sharing things in our Apex code while writing any business logic, any piece of code. Make reusability of code. So reusability as so we should prepare some kind of smaller methods to do a reusability. So whenever we are going to design any module, so we should just collect some of the reusable methods, something like querying of querying of SQL records, querying of any subject, then updating of any objects. So those kind of things we can just collect as a method or a generic type of method, and we can use those generic method as a reusability, so that it will be very minimal changes, and it will be reused throughout the program. So this reusability plays very important role in the best practice. So as you can see, like breaking off methods into simpler methods, if possible, making your code more modular and easy to read and maintain. So we can just use the reusability as maintenance or just a readable or modularized kind of approach. So and you can see so we can use the code as a generic, making is it as a generic and reused with minimum modifications. Next is code coverage. So as code coverage is used as a developer standpoint to do a unit testing. So we can do a positive or negative testing for our piece of code, for our business logic. So we should keep in mind some points whenever we are doing writing a code coverage. Something like we should not we should use use assert statement whenever we are using whenever we are writing any test method, and we should not use see all data true, because see all data true is something like it will take our real database to do a performance to do any DML operations. So better not to use see all data true, so that it will not impact our real database. Next is return early pattern. So like I was explaining, so if we have multiple conditional statements, so we will just return at that point whenever our condition will follow. So usually people will do something like they will just remove these return statement and they will return at the last. So what will happen, like if we are started comparing from start, and then we come to the next condition, it will increase the comparison time, and which will decrease the performance of code. So we can use, so avoiding nested loops within loops. As we know, like whenever we will use a nesting for loop, what will happen, like let's suppose the first for loop is executing 5 times, and for a single for loop, another for loop, nested for loop, is running some more 5 times. So 25 times the total loop execution will be there. So whenever we do a nesting kind of approach, so what will happen? It will do it will increase the time complexity of a code. So because it will go as a order of n square. So instead, what we can do, we can just fragment the loops as a, we can use a method to include in the loops, or we can just design our business logic something like we should use map to to increase the performance. So next is we don't have to mix all the automation process at once in any of the requirement. We should be stick with a single automation process just to increase the performance. So we will use this as a best practice to do it. So whenever we will just mix up, it will increase, it will give the poor performance, and it will be always technical debt on admins, and devs are not collaborating kind of. So usually in the project, it will happen like some admin has done some process builder, and some developer has done some code. So it will mix up, and it will be very hard to debug that whole process. So either we decide on what needs to be done and what is the best way to do, and watch what will be the future scope. So we have to always remember about the future scope whenever we are doing any automation or Apex trigger. Next is naming convention. Naming conventions are very important, as I was explaining. So Salesforce has no restriction on the naming convention. I feel like that is a bad thing, but But because of not enforcing, not forced to follow, maybe we it will be very hard if we are not following the naming convention. So it will be a problem for other developers who is onboarding new to that project. So they will feel they will not get the clear indication of classes and variables and constant methods. So the naming convention should be short, and it should be very descriptive with the short name, and so we should prepare some kind of checklist, like class should be in this name, whatever the decision will be, like however we decide, that should be followed throughout the project whenever we are writing. Stays set up a code review checklist and code review process. So whenever we are designing any software, development is not very matter. The matter here is like the maintenance of a software, because lot of investment go on the maintenance part of any software. So whenever we come under maintenance, so we have to see the code review, how the code got written, what is the we have to just arrange any review process. PR review we have to use. We have to use some kind of CI/CD platform just to increase the efficiency of a code level testing, like whatever we are writing. So there are different type of tools which give the performance of the code. Some are like PMD, Salesforce checkmarks, SonarQube. So those all things, all the tools will be used. What they will do, they will just extract the complexities, like cyclomatic complexity, different type of complexity calculation they will do, and they will set like they will have a kind of mark, like we should use this much of if in a single method. So we can use those platforms to work on the work on the code review process, and it will help as a best practice in future. So we should follow the code review process for this.